I hereby call this meeting to order, and I'd like to thank tonight's presenters and everyone joining us in person via live stream. Thanks for being here. I don't know who's going to lead us in the pledge. Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, all of our board members are present, with the exception of Jim Facer, who's excused. The superintendent's also excused, and Susan Pettit will present in his place. There are a couple of addendum materials which include supporting information on the Idaho General Fund revenue report, camp requests, and staffing update.
May I stop for just 1 second? So he gave me a new tablet here, and now it's asking me for a login.
Oh, okay. It
I-
should just be your district login, but if you have trouble with it, then let me know.
Okay. I'm not even sure, well, it's always just here.
So it should be
I know.
Clark.
Oh, the Clark AT, okay. So, my apologies, everyone. And it's sd25.us.
You don't have to put any of that, just the user funny HE part.
Okay.
You're under pressure now.
I know. Hope I remember my password.
Here. You use mine and I'll sign in.
I do know my password, but yeah, it just went blank.
Well, you can use
I
mine,
apologize.
and then I will, I'll sign into this one.
I won't send out anything under your name.
Okay.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the addenda. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda with the addendum.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay, the motion's passed. Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve the following minutes as presented. Board work session, April 12th, 2022. Regular board meeting, April 19th, 2022. Executive session, student discipline, April 27th, 2022. Special meeting and executive session, labor contract matters, April 28th, 2022. Board work session, May 10th, 2022. Executive session, student discipline, May 11th, 2022. Executive session personnel, May 17th, 2022. Regular board meeting, May 17th, 2022. Executive session personnel, student discipline, May 25th, 2022. Executive session, student discipline, May 31st, 2022. Is there a motion? Do I have a motion? Going once, going twice.
I hereby move that the board approve the minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next on, the motion is passed. Next on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda, which includes authorizing payment of claims, approving the supplemental financial information, and approving the amended human resource activity. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to,
Okay. Is
Yeah.
there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
aye.
Aye. No opposed, motion's passed. Next on the agenda is a public written comment on topics not pertinent to the agenda action items. No written comment was received on topics, excuse me, not pertinent to the agenda action items. I have no request for public comment. So we'll move on. Next on the agenda are reports. Included in the packet are the following self-explanatory reports for public information. The Idaho General Fund Revenue Report. And next on the agenda are the proposed revenue and expenditure budgets, presentations, and public hearing. The budget presentation will be provided by Jonathan Balls and Carl Smart.
We're good.
Testing, testing, testing. Testing, testing. We'll go.
You want to share?
No, you got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are here tonight to present to you our proposed budget for next year. And we, as a district, or all districts across the state, have to have a budget in place by the first day of July. And so this is an opportunity to present to you the budget. And we have been working on this budget now since the middle of February. And so what you see before you is a compilation of all the work we've done since February, and an update after our legislature not convened, what's the other word, they departed from Boise in the month of April. So we will go through this, and we'll have an opportunity after our presentation to have an actual hearing where we can hear input from additional input from patrons if they would like, or from board members. And so with that being said, we will just kind of just cruise through this presentation, and we'll let Jonathan and I will tag team it tonight, and we will take questions after we get done here, okay?
Okay, so you see on the screen again, it's, you'll see a lot of comparisons from last year to this year. Again, we're just wrapping up our fiscal year 22 on the right-hand side, and we're starting July 1st, our fiscal year 2023. Again, you'll see the several different funds. You'll see the majority, that the general fund is the overwhelming majority. That's the largest fund that we have over. Normally, before the ESSER, the federal ESSER funds, the school plant facility fund was our second largest, but with our ESSER dollars that we received from the federal government, that has now taken over that second place. Again, you can see the ESSER fund is decreasing a little bit as we've been using that for different projects around the district, and we still have 2 years to spend that. Going to the next one, you'll see a history of some of the major fund categories. Going back, obviously our budget year this coming up, and then the last 3 years, and then the percent change from fiscal year 20 to the current year. The current proposed budget year. And so you'll see kind of an increase in the fiscal year for general fund, and that's primarily driven you that big jump, and we'll get more into that, but that was from the state giving more in discretionary dollars that we used for health insurance. And jump in, Carl, anytime if you want there. You'll see another highlight, school plant facility decreased a little bit, and that was because of the finishing the Pokey High remodel. Okay, that was funded through school plant, And so as that wrapped up last year, that you'll see a decrease there. Just different things, food service, and we'll get more into these, Head Start. I will maybe comment this second to last one, student activity. There was a new GASB rule that just started last year that we have to roll into our financials all of the secondary schools' accounts. And so as Carl and I talked about that, there's really nothing that we can budget for. So it's more of a reporting tool. So in October, when I come to you, when we come for the an accounting of how our audit went and end of last year, you'll get an updated information on basically how these schools spent their money there. But that's why that's.
Yeah, and in this conversation that Jonathan and I had, is budgeting appropriate or not? And we put a budget in there this year just because we didn't want to have a zero line item there, but it was probably not an appropriate number to put in there. It might be just a reporting period or mechanism where we report those 2 years where we have actual numbers. So that's why we have this kind of odd zero numbers, zero and a number. We will probably in future years just leave the current and the future year zero and just report actual for those 2 years. And of course, 2022 will have actual numbers come October that we will fill in for next year, so.
So there's, again, a little bit of history there. So now what is included in these other funds? Again, as you can see, there's several. The local funds, any grants that we receive from local businesses and so forth. Our food service is a local fund. Plant facility obviously is a local fund. We have a little print shop that helps offset some copying costs for our schools is in there. The VIVA Trust, which is the voluntary employee benefit account, again, used for classified staff to offset some health insurance. And then, of course, the student activity. I won't read all these, I didn't need to do that. But you can see, again, federal funds, again, the different funds that we receive from the federal government. And again, these funds are very limited in scope. They're very narrow in most of them are very narrow in what we can spend and do. And then, of course, the state funds, driver's ed, professional technical education, sometimes called CTE, technology, and then substance abuse prevention. So when we talk other funds, all those funds get lumped together. Okay. So this is a summary statement that we're required to publish in the paper, which we did so 10 or 11 days ago. Again, showing beginning revenues for the 2 prior actual years, our budget that we're just wrapping up in these last couple weeks, and then the proposed budget going forward. Again, you can show the different revenues. Obviously this form comes from the state, so they want to see those 7 different categories of revenues, and then the dozen or so expenditure accounts on the bottom side. Again, we're always pushing for a balanced budget. There is the goal and your fiscal responsibility as a board as well, which Carl and I help you attain.
Interestingly enough, that document Jonathan mentioned that we published in the paper, it was on the 10th. We have to send that to the state tax commission so that they know that we did that. So that is part of what we do when we submit all of our things to the county at the first part of September.
Okay, so the next slide again is just some comparisons. Again, this is looking at all those other funds, looking at the sources of revenue. Most overwhelming majority comes from the federal government. Again, some state, obviously our local taxes are playing to them, specifically going to the plant facility. And you can kind of see there, again, you'll see that the federal government is kind of getting back to what it normally has been as we spend down that ESSER money. And so that's that amount going down there.
We should note that the transfers did go up quite a significant amount, almost doubled. And that has to do with some of the money we transferred to the other funds to help cover their insurance costs.
Right.
So that's why you see that fairly significant increase in the amount of transfers.
Okay. Next one, again, just shows kind of the expenditures. Again, since a lot of these are driven by projects, by supplies, by purchase services for specific groups of learners, that's where you'll see, compared to where Carl will talk about the expenditures of the 100 fund, expenditures in these other funds, the majority of are going to supplies and then capital objects, which are any project that's over $5,000 that gets into there. Of course, there are some salaries in there. Some of these other funds, salaries and benefits, and then even some of these insurances as well. So again, just kind of the high view overview of kind of what these expenditures look like.
My turn?
I think your turn.
Okay, the general fund. It's used to account for the bulk of the expenses and revenues that we get into the district. It's the largest single fund of the district and accounts for about just shy of 70% this year, which is down a little bit. It's usually more than that because of the ESSER situation. Like as Jonathan mentioned, the other funds are restricted to specific items or special purposes. They're very narrow in their scope. And again, this is just a 4-year history of the general fund side of the budget. And then we have 2 years of actual, the current year that we're in, the adjusted budget, and the proposed budget for next year. And again, just a little bit of a breakdown, if you will get a comparison here in a second, of how the money comes from into the general fund. We have the bulk of it, of course, coming from the state. For this year, about 89% of the money comes from the state. Then we have our local tax revenue as well. And little bits of revenue come from other local sources or federal. So very, very similar in breakdown from one year to the next, last year to this year, or this year to next year. I'm already into 2023, sorry about that. But this is the comparison when we look at special funds versus the general fund. You can see the breakdown is very different in the way of sources of revenue. State in the general fund side, federal for the special fund side. And likewise, the general fund is heavy in salary and benefits. Almost 88% of our general fund is budgeted to go towards salary and benefits. And there are some other things in there, supplies and purchase services and that sort of thing. When you look at utilities, they will always fall under purchase services. And then, of course, supplies will also include textbooks and those sort of purchases. And the comparison to general fund to special funds is they're very different in their makeup. Special fund you'll see is got a lot of black in there in the way of demonstrating capital objects. So that's our school plant. And so you'll see that the makeup of the expenditure side is very different. And as we budget for the general fund, what's very important to understand is it is all driven by the number of students we have in our system. For the past couple years, and this is kind of ironic because over the last several years they hired a consulting firm, think they were out of Colorado. Do you remember where they were from? That
I'm-
did the funding formula?
Oh, yes, I think Colorado.
And one of the premises in that new funding formula they were attempting to approve was that funding would be based upon enrollment rather than ADA. And so over the last couple of years, it has actually been based upon enrollment, which has been to everybody's saving grace, basically, because the ADA was so poor with COVID going on. So here you see our history, and you can see we took quite a dip back in 2021, and that was because of COVID-related issues. We lost about 400 students. It's slowly coming back, and so, however, when you look at these numbers in the future, we have a fairly large group of kids in the secondary schools that will be moving through, and so that's kind of a reflection of that bubble we have going through our population. And this just breaks it down in another way. This is elementary, secondary. So our elementary numbers are going to take a little bit of an increase this next year, a decrease. And there's our bubble in the secondary schools that'll soon start dwindling out into 2024, 25, and 26. So we'll see how the growth in the community might change these numbers. But this is where, based upon the current numbers that we have, this is where we anticipate us being over the next several years. And of course, this drives the bulk of the state funding. How many kids you have. In the past, it's been average daily attendance. How many kids we have will determine what kind of funding we get from the state. And there are two major funding mechanisms that we get from the state for the general fund: the distribution factor and the salary apportionment. As Jonathan mentioned earlier, our distribution factor took a fairly significant increase this year, and that was because of the state's attempts to help fund medical insurance. And so it was a $6,000 per unit increase, which we have never seen anything like that in the past. It's always been, if we got $1,000, we were counting ourselves lucky. It's usually in the $500 or $600 per year increase. Both of these mechanisms these funding mechanisms are based on units, which we can really relate to maybe a classroom, and as a result of the average daily membership over a period of time. For the salary apportionment, that period of time is through the first Friday in November. And for the distribution factor or our discretionary dollars, it's the best 28 weeks. And so they have different periods of time that they measure average daily membership. For this current year, we're using 620 units for our salary apportionment, 613 units for our distribution factor funding. As I mentioned, this is not based upon ADA this next year.
And even that 613 that's an estimate of what you're.
That is an estimate, and we will not know what these numbers are until next November.
So it could come
But-
back higher.
It could come back higher, could come back a little bit lower, but we are protected at 3%. And so 3% is a fairly significant amount of money when you look at 3% of what we see. But I don't see that happening based upon the numbers that we see for next year. There are estimates for an enrollment.
So by protected, do you mean that we have that much leeway to be able to get that funding, that additional funding, up to 3%?
Well, let's put it this way. Right now, we have 620 units. Let's say the bottom fell out of our enrollment and we lost 50 units. We would be protected at 18, which is 3% of 620, or well,
So we would
close to
lose that additional?
So
would only
that
lose 3% of it.
additional 32 units, we would not see that decrease until the following year. It kind of eases you into that sort of a loss.
And then also the reverse, we would gain 3% if we had an increase?
The increase is always given to you.
Yeah.
Oh, it is
It's
always
just on the, it's
100% of
protection
it.
if we lose it.
Oh, I see, okay. So 100% of the increase, that's good.
Now, you'll hear some of the larger or the fastest growing districts saying, oh, we get a lot of growth beyond the first Friday in November. That doesn't get taken into account
Oh,
for salary-based apportionment. It will be for the distribution factor, but not for salary-based apportionment, which is where you get your funding for all your teachers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a catch-22. So yes, you do get increase, but up to a certain point for only salary apportionment. The distribution factor becomes operational funds from the state, which support all areas of the budget, from salaries to benefits to purchase services and supplies. So it gets put in the budget, and it just runs the gamut on what it is paid or what it purchases. The distribution factor history. Over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a challenge trying to keep up with the state and the way they've changed their distribution factor. Let's see, was this 2021? The unit value started out at $28,887. That's where when we put our budget together. By the end of the year, they had reduced it by $5,600. And then they turned around and gave us some money from ESSER to compensate for that $5,600. And that's a reflection of fiscal year 2022, because it was an amount of money that they sent to us after our budget had been we were about 9 months into our budget before they sent that to us. And then this year, again, they enhanced our budget by about $6,300 to help pay for insurance. And I don't think they increased any other portion of that distribution factor for anything else but the insurance portion. They break the distribution factor into 2 pieces: discretionary dollars, if you want to call it that, and insurance. And I think they lumped it all into insurance when they sent it to us this year.
And again, that unit value, you basically times that by the units, and that's what you will get in operational dollars, or the state calls them discretionary dollars. But obviously, sometimes we don't have discretion to use them. We have to use them to pay our light bills, and, they're really operational dollars.
Salary-based apportionment. This year, there was a 7% increase in the base salaries from fiscal year 2022 for administrative salaries and classified salaries. The career ladder, it uses a different funding mechanism, and it uses an average salary rather than a base salary. That average salary is based upon where all of our employees are placed on the career ladder. And so the average salary for the pupil service personnel is $52,000, and for all the others on the career ladder, $52,194. The minimum salary for teachers is now $40,742, which is up a whopping $373 from a year ago. The classified base salary equates to $11.94 an hour. Approximately 7.5% of our classified employees' hours paid from the general fund are paid less than the state reimbursement. 92.5% of our employees are paid more. The actual administrative base salary is adjusted by the experience of the district staff. This adjustment is an index which is based upon our administrative staff's longevity and education. So we have a staff that is highly educated and been around a long time. So 1.899 is a fairly high index, and it equates to an average salary when you do the multiplication of $78,000 and some change that the state sends us for each administrative position. Balancing the budget. Our current revenues this year in our general fund are $91.8 million. Our requested current expenditures, which includes the salaries that we've talked about, the benefits, the textbooks, the supplies, the utilities, all that, $92.2 million. So we were within $400,000 of being current expenditures with current revenues. Our estimated beginning fund balance coming over from next year will be about $17 million. And this is, like I said, an estimate. So less than $400,000 leaves about $16.5 million that we can distribute back into reserves to cover our reserves that we're required to have. So the contingency, the 1% is $918,000. The unappropriated fund balance is $3.6 million. Our inventory reserve is $300,000. And we had to send about $858,000 as a transfer to the other funds to help cover some of their expenses. Mainly that increase in insurance costs by going to the state plan. So that leaves us available funds in reserve for fiscal year 2023 of $10.8 million. And as we've talked in the past, we have sufficient revenues to take care of all the requests that we had. And this is reflective of that. In our budget, it includes all of the salary increases we've talked about over the last couple of months. It also includes the insurances that you approved in the month of, was it May? I've lost track of time. We are going to continue having our own life insurance carrier. And they have given us a 0% increase for this next year, which is fairly common for that one. Our state medical plan, by going to the state medical plan over our Pacific source, there was a 24.16% increase, or about $202.72 per employee per month. And that is a significant amount of increase. And we had that discussion in prior board meetings. But of course, the state was going to cover the bulk of that through that increase in the discretionary dollars. So for life insurance, or for the medical, dental, vision, life insurance, I kept throwing life in here. Medical, dental, and vision insurances, the total increase to the general fund is about $2.5 million. And is offset by the increase in the state's unit value. We will not use the VEBA trust this year to offset any of those increases. So that VEBA trust, those dollars will still be there for future use. Retirement sick leave, PERSI is again waiving retirement sick leave payments over the next 12 months. So that saves the general fund about $700,000. Retirement sick leave has historically been about 1.25% of salary. And Jonathan had a little bit of
We
a,
attended a training today from Percy, and where they talked about this retirement sick leave, and that fund at Percy is so well-funded that they anticipate it'll be several years before they'll need to start charging us that, 1.26%.
Can you just explain, this is one so what does this mean? The school district contributes to the fund, is that, or is
Yes,
that
so
the employee contributes?
before we went on holiday 4 years ago?
probably 3
3 or
years
4
ago.
years ago, it was just automatic, everybody that was PERSI eligible, so anybody with 20 or more hours, just an automatic, we had, as school districts, we had to send 1.26% of their salary to PERSI under this retirement sick leave.
Okay,
And then it accumulated, if the employee doesn't use their sick leave, then it accumulates until they retire, and that's a benefit upon retirement. There's a formula that they get about half of those dollars, based on their, daily rate that they can use for insurance
After they retire.
after they retire.
Okay.
And it's all money that they
They've all money
Paid
they put in.
that
However,
was
we've,
out of their salary.
I mean, even, well, we've all had employees though that used all their sick days, you know, and the district had to come up with the sub rate, but that money, that 1.26% of their whole salary was still being
Sitting there.
sent there. And so I think that's just, there's a myriad of different ways where people are just not using this money. And I'll even say, it's the same thing, it's not only for schools, but, state employees have the same thing, and they're even more well-funded. They must use their sick days quite a bit, because he doesn't even envision a day that the state agencies would have to pay in this sick leave. Did that answer your question?
It did, yes.
Just a little bit there.
So what happens really, and the mechanism to make this work is this pot of retirement sick leave dollars sits in the PERSI funds. And my portion of that is set aside for me, based upon, as Jonathan said, half of my daily rate and the number of days I take with me. And they will pay your insurance premiums, so if you have Medicare or whatever it might be, those premiums will come out of that retirement sick leave pot rather than out of my insurance, or not my insurance, my retirement check. Until that pot of money finally is all exhausted, then it starts coming out of your retirement check. So it's a great benefit for employees. And we've always told them, save on, retain your sick leave as much as you can, because it has some value to you when you retire.
And wasn't this one of the issues that was a concern with going to the state plan, is whether this would still be in place, correct?
And we know that it will be.
Okay.
We have our own caps, where the state has like 900 hours or something like that as a cap for the number of dollars they can accumulate. Ours is 492 days.
Wow.
And so that might be a reflection of, too, is why that state plan has more funding to it as well.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And it isn't paid out in a lump sum, it's paid out as,
So basically, as Carl said, it's housed with PERSI, and rather than Blue Cross now sending me the invoice for my insurance, they send the bill to PERSI. And PERSI plays Blue Cross on my behalf, you know, of course, when I'm retired.
And that's the only
Oh,
thing it can be
that's-
used for. It's not, you can't cash
Correct.
out
Correct.
instead
Correct.
and get your own
Yeah,
insurance plan.
Interestingly enough, sick leave, you know, has value to you as you take it here in the district. But once you retire, the sick leave has zero value to you as an employee.
Gotcha.
The only value it has is with that PERSI allotment for you. We've had people who have left and want to be paid for their sick leave. There's not a dime worth of value to those retirement sick leave, or those sick leave days. It only has value when it gets transferred to PERSI in Boise.
And I was using Blue Cross as the example, but, you know, previously it was Pacific Source.
Pacific,
Right, so
right.
it has to be approved vendors with PERSI, and kind of tied to the school.
Interesting. Okay.
The ESSER funds, we've had a lot of discussion about the ESSER funds over the last 2 or 3 years. The legislature crafted the fiscal year 21, 22, and 23 budgets that they sent to the districts in such a way that it will require districts to use some of the ESSER funds to compensate for the reduction in state funding, which was very obvious last year in fiscal year 21. There are 3 categories of ESSER funding. We have the CARES, the SRSA, and the ARPA. And they all have different mechanisms of what you can use them for. We have accounted for them in different funds in our budget, so 250, 253, and 254, if I remember correctly.
250, 252, and 254.
Okay.
Yeah, 259.
Each act has different funding rules and spending requirements. All of the ESSER funds on all 3 are in all 3 fiscal years are being accounted for in fund, right there, 250,
Yeah.
252, 254, and there's actually 2 more, 259 and 281. 259 is a special ed one, And 281, as, it was loss of learning, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and that was some of the earlier
Yeah,
CARES Act,
yeah.
you know, the straight, the blended learning and so forth.
Blended learning, that's the one. There cannot be a one-to-one replacement of general fund dollars with ESSER fund dollars. So to say we want to spend ESSER dollars to buy our next textbook adoption, that would not be a valid use of those funds. So just to say we have the ESSER funds, we're going to replace them, we'll use those instead of general fund dollars, that's not always a possibility.
And I will mention, I guess with ESSER, so there will be some more work for you to do going forward. Again, we have a tentative budget on how we want to spend that, but we kind of want to wait till start, you know, it's closer to the start of school to see needs, to see how we can use that. And so we'll come to you in a work session and show you kind of this is how we think we need it, but if there's anything with substitutes or anything that might come over the next 2 years, you know, that ESSER could use, that's, well, this whole document is a fluid, living document, but particularly the ESSER funds, you will definitely have, you know, more say in that, probably even the next 2 months, we'll bring that to
Didn't the
you.
state require you to submit at least where you thought it was gonna go?
That is correct,
And,
that is
and
correct.
when do you have to put the nail in the, you know, stake in the ground and say, okay, this is exactly what we're gonna do with it? And
So,
Yeah.
so when I had to report how we spent the ESSER money from, this was going back to like October of 20 to June of 21, so last year, I did have to say, okay, this is how we're planning on spending the remaining money. But again, it was very broad categories, some salaries, benefits, purchase services, equipment, supplies. And so I plugged some numbers in there based on our overarching budget that the previous board had kind of, you know, approved there, but knowing that we'll come back almost every year to you and say, okay, this is how much money we have. Again, it was an estimate in these numbers. And then here's some of the activities, here's some of the equipment, or here's some of the needs that we see in the schools or facilities, and this, you know, obviously making sure that we can spend the money appropriately, because they're really kind of cracking down. It was kind of loosey-goosey at the beginning, you could spend it on anything, and then they realized, no, it needs to be more little tight expenditures there, and we're following the guidelines that they are providing. But anyway, you'll be able to see those more specifically.
And we have been trying to be frugal with those funds too.
Yeah.
We didn't call them frivolous purchase or anything like that. There was nothing that was in our philosophy to be even doing that sort of thing. Balancing the budget again, contingency reserves at the 1% board policy. Unappropriated fund balance is also at the board policy of 4%. Designated reserves, which is that warehouse inventory item, has been reduced to match last year's actual values. There is an appropriated fund balance that could be used to help offset additional federal and state reductions if they were to occur. And we all know kind of how things are going with inflation and the talk of recession. So we do have some money in reserve in case some of those things get out of hand. So that's the good news. As in many prior years, the supplemental levy was critical in balancing this year's budget in the general fund side. And of course, talking about supplemental levy, we will certify our levies with the county. On this sheet, you can see there are 6 different levies. We have only levied 3 over the last 4 years. I don't remember when we had an emergency levy, and the bond was paid off years and years ago. But we just keep them on there just to show that we do have these abilities to levy. Our levies, sorry, did I interrupt you?
No,
You were gonna say
no,
something?
you're
Sorry.
good. No, you're good.
We have a supplemental levy, or tort levy, and a school plant. For many years, on our tax forms, this tort levy never showed up because it was offset by some property tax replacement that actually comes from the State Tax Commission. The tort levy has gone up as property values have gone up, and that was mainly the reason for that tort levy increase. Replacement values of our schools. The property tax replacement has not gone up any. It was a fixed amount for many, many years. It will continue to be a fixed amount. And so our tort levy has started to show up, but it's a minimal amount on the tax, on the books, or for the taxing authority at the county. And then we have school plantings, our supplemental in there. The taxable property values, you can see there that they have increased as we've all received our tax notices for the last couple of years. They've gone up significantly. However, we only levy a flat amount of money. We only get what our levies are certified. That's what we will get. It won't change based upon any increase in the property values. And the levy rate has actually been going down based upon that. So I can't say that everybody's going to go down in their home because of the way that the homeowner's exemption works. But we will certify these levies in the first part of September. And we can have another opportunity as we get to September to have discussions about how these levies will look. But right now, this is what we have put in our budgets to be certified with the county come September. And with that, that concludes our presentation, unless you have other questions, so we can.
Okay, next on the agenda then are the proposed, I'm sorry. I'll recess the regular meeting and convene a public hearing to solicit input on the proposed revenue and expenditure budgets for the 2022-2023 school year. I have no requests in for input on the budget, so I'll close.
Mr. Vitale, may I make one comment?
Sure.
We do have a budget document that we prepare every year. And as we talked over the last week with some of you as board members, this document's 200 and some odd pages long. And it is that presentation that was published in the paper Friday the 10th is a summation of everything that's in this. But this document is out on the website for anybody who
Okay,
is
good.
really interested in digging into all the details. So that has been published out on the website.
Okay, thank you. So I'll close the public hearing now and reconvene the regular meeting. I would entertain a motion to adopt the Pocatello Chubbuck School District number 25 revenue and expenditure budgets. Is there a motion?
I hereby move that the board adopt the Pocatello Chubbuck School District number 25 revenue and expenditure budgets, certify the levies, and authorize appropriations for the 22-23 school year per the attached resolution as if read into the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
The only comment that I would make is just that we talked about just how, major projects would go through SIP committee for, the board to be able to have input, discuss, talk about before it would come for approval, which is already the way that it is. Is that right?
Yeah,
Right. And then also the fact that outdoors committee is kind of a subcommittee of the SIP committee, so then that proposal is kind of an advisory committee, and their proposals would go to the SIP committee to be discussed before it comes to the board. Is that right? Okay. Okay. I just wanted to reaffirm that, so that things won't come to the board before they've been discussed in committees that also have board members on them.
Okay,
Now, you bring up a good point, Ms. Judy. Just because we've adopted this budget tonight does not mean that it's not changeable over the course of the year. So as we have those discussions, we can certainly come back and amend our budget in the month of March. That'll reflect all those changes we might do during the year. So that you bring up a good point, we can, this not just the way it's going be, we can make some changes if we need to, and we can have those discussions as we move through the year.
Thank you, I appreciate that clarification.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? No. So this motion is passed. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll now move on to curriculum and instruction, school safety and athletics, and we'll start with Lori Craney, who will report on the following Head Start program,
Right,
kindergarten registration.
yep, those are my two.
Okay.
So, good evening. The number of students who are enrolled in the program were 135 students. For next year, we have 182 applications, which is really good, and they just seem to be coming in, and that's thrilling. They are currently interviewing for positions there, so we're in hopes that we can fill those positions and have the program be servicing those students. Some updates, the Head Start office will close on June 17th, so it is closed, and it'll reopen on July 18th, and that's when they work on applications again. The first day of the school year is August 22nd. It's August 23rd for the rest of the school district, and that's for the full-day students. The part-day students will be on August 30th. The facilities, they're out there moving things around, so that is exciting. So keep your fingers crossed. So they reported that on June 6th, they began working on the foundation, and they were starting to frame and starting to pour the concrete. Materials from one of the Head Start classrooms at Wilcox was moved back to Lincoln. The other Wilcox and the one at Jefferson will be relocated once the modular is in place. And I think it's tentatively scheduled for July 12th and 13th. So if you want to see a site, yeah, bring big cranes, come in and lift it up and set it down, is what I hear. So, yeah, it'll be the place to be. So, for the child outcomes then, we have with us Kim Baumgarten, who is the Head Start Children's Service Manager, and she's going to briefly highlight some of the areas of growth, and then she'll be here to answer any questions that you may have about the Head Start program.
Thank you. Just some of the things we looked at with our outcomes report were considering some of the challenges that we have had this year. Attendance, both for staff and children, has been higher than normal, and staff shortages have never been a problem before. That's a new thing for us this year. So there were some times when classrooms had to be closed because we didn't have the required number of staff to take care of the children. Some other changes this year, which always affects our assessment was that 4 of our 10 teachers were new teachers, and we had a couple of classrooms where teachers changed throughout the course of the year. So those were some of the kinds of things that we looked at possibly having an impact on our assessment in the long run. There was somewhat of an impact, but we found as we looked at the end of the year data that children still made growth. The reports are based on those children who were there for the entire year. The first page that with the snapshot report has our social emotional language and approaches to learning on it. Those are the areas that in the past couple of years we've really focused on, knowing that science tells us that having those soft skills in place is really critical to learn academic learning. So we wanted to be sure that as we were preparing kids, that's where for school, that's where our focus was mostly, which resulted then in our,
Can I ask, so can you explain what these columns mean? So the below or the meeting and exceeding, what do the two numbers represent?
Yes. with this, the tool that we use, it's based on widely held expectations that come from milestones and child development where children should be and are in ranges. So a child that falls below is not quite where we would expect them to be. Under the meeting, they're right within that area we would expect. And if they're exceeding, then they've moved a little bit past what we would expect.
So is the gray number the standard and then the black is?
The gray number is last year's data.
Oh,
So one of
okay.
the things we wanted to look at was how we compared to last year.
Okay.
And we found that those numbers are very much the same as last year. Last year in social emotional, we started out at 56% below, which it's typical because the kids are just coming in at that age. So we expect them to enter below, and 52% this year. So those differences were pretty minimal in how children arrived into the program compared to last year with whatever the changes might have been over the couple of years. We really focused on the social emotional language and approaches to learning, and that's where we actually saw the most growth. The other areas, we spent the first 3 months of our school year mostly focusing on that and only gathering data on that. And then we added in the physical, the literacy, and the math areas. Our literacy and math numbers are down compared to what they have been in the past. But we really feel like that's because of more of a push to get those soft skills in place. So we'll be looking at, and those, math was has always been our little bit lowest of an area. So we've always been working on trying to increase that one. But overall, in our snapshot report of where kids are at, we see that growth was made for most children, and it's pretty typical as to what we've seen before. On the growth report page, that is a report that, rather than measuring where children are within widely held expectations, it measures whether they made the amount of growth that we would have expected. Typically, when we look at this, we see children who remain in the below that perhaps have a disability, so they were already behind, but even though they made growth, their growth may have still been slower, which is part of what helps them to stay behind, is that slow amount of growth. We've also noticed that children who tended to have less growth missed a lot of school, or they were children who had some pretty significant behaviors which impacted their ability to pick up on the things that we were teaching. So this is where we really kind of saw the difference between last year and this year, is that the new children that we're getting in are picking up fairly quickly, but their amount of growth is slower. So I think adding that pandemic piece in kind of made that growth slower overall for more children than it had in the past. So trying to work on catching that up. We do set, according to standards, we set 5 school readiness goals each year, 1 in each of the 5 domains that we're required to collect data on and teach. We have other domains, but those are domains that we don't collect data on because there isn't scientific evidence in art and science and social studies for this age of children. So we did make gains in our school readiness goals, which we focused on helping kids to focus better and attend better so that they would be able to gain information, helping them to learn strategies to calm themselves and understand their emotions better so that they're able to not let that be in the way of their learning. We also looked on identifying at least 10 letters and sounds. Typically look at the letters in their name first, and most children were able to do that. And for math and the science area, we look at understanding the quantity in numbers and what those numbers mean and show. And then the last one for perceptual motor, we worked on, especially on fine motor skills, because that's one of the areas that overall has been getting lower and lower for children with less opportunity to use their fine and gross motor skills as they used to. So, but we made gains in all of those. Our action plan for next year is to continue to work on math and literacy. And also our assessment tool has a tool in it that allows teachers to practice and learn how to rate more closely to the people who set that rating scale in place. And we have a lot of new teachers, so we'll be having them complete that so that we have a better idea of reliability. We'll also be doing some additional training in collection of data, summative assessment, determining what data is beneficial to keep and what data or to collect and what data isn't, so that we're not spending time collecting information that isn't useful, and that we're also meeting the required components. We are bringing in the company that we purchase our curriculum as well as our assessment tool from, and they're going to be providing 5 days worth of on-site training, part on the curriculum, part on assessment, and some other part in lesson planning and how to make those more intentional so that we're meeting the kids' needs in a more intensive manner. And then they'll be coming later in the year to do a couple of more. For our professional learning communities, we have focused triennially on reviewing the data. We plan to continue that and also plan to continue collaboration and working on our lesson plans to make them across the board more effective for children.
Question for you, Lori. So is there ever any, I mean, there's a lot of research there that I'm sure the federal government has a hand in that.
Yeah, they do. Everything has to be scientific based.
So then I'm curious, is the kids once they've gone to kindergarten, is there any research that's done on those kids that have come from Head Start and how they?
We have not done that. We don't have a tool that makes it very easy for us to do that. It's a hand tool is really what it is. So,
But for
yeah,
kindergarten, there's data.
Yeah.
but
It's not
identifying
Head
which
Start.
of
See if
those,
there's a,
a correlation between
correlation
those,
there.
yeah.
That's the
At some point, every year we think, okay, we need to be doing this, and there's, there'll be, 5 at one school and 3 at another, and all, and then we get distracted, and it takes so long to be pulling that together that,
Sure.
but we do know that the anecdotal comments that we get are that our learners from Head Start come ready to learn. They know how to be learners, which in and of itself is huge. They come in, they're ready to be soaking it up. They know what school is about. They know how to line up to take turns and all of those things
Calm
instead of.
themselves, I
Yeah.
like that one.
And so all of those are, and you'll note that they spend a great portion of the first part where they're looking at all of those socials. So those are the comments that we often, oh geez, it's too bad that they didn't go to Head Start, would be the comment that we would get from a kindergarten teacher if they have a learner there. So more anecdotal.
There's some national
There is
data
national.
on Head Start, though, in there, Lori.
Yes, there is. And just on preschool in general
Yeah.
and the impact of that.
Right.
But not as far as the local, we haven't done it.
Okay.
Put it on your agenda.
There you go.
It's been on the agenda
It's
for
been
a
on
few
our
years.
agenda every
It's just a
year.
matter of
and then-
taking our data and kindergarten data and figuring out how to funnel it all together.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next, Sue
Thanks,
Pedro,
Kim.
report
Oh, do you
on,
want the kindergarten, you gotta look at the kindergarten registration.
okay, that's, sorry.
And it is in there for you to look at.
I'm
We
in a
are,
rush.
right now, the number of students that we have registered are 676. We're on track for Mr. Smart's projections for kindergarten. From the last time I reported, we're up at Idaho by 4 students, up at Ellis, which it continues to be going up there, and Indian Hills, we're up a few students there. On Monday, from over the weekend, we had 10 more learners that had registered online, so that
Wow.
continues to be, a good tool to get people, get our little.
And they're all full-time. You didn't end up doing any half-time, or do you still
Nope.
have
No.
some?
We did not, and, we've opened it up that,
Right.
sent it out there that we would, have a conversation with them about that, and parents just, there were a couple of principals who had some conversations, and they'll work it out, and so I think we'll be ready to go in the fall with the full-time, see how that
Okay,
works.
great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
That's great.
Sue,
Thank you.
See, this isn't working?
early graduation?
I'll just do my loud voice because that's not working either.
Okay,
So we have a couple of early graduates. These are full-year early graduates, so they graduated at the end of their 11th grade, and they're eligible then for that early graduate scholarship. And so we're hoping to approve that.
I know, okay. Second is a second reading for our personal device, electronic device, and we had changed that last time to add in that video piece. And so if you can take a look at that tonight. And then out-of-state travel requests overnight, we have one for volleyball that's going to be happening in September. And so they're getting those done early, or August, yay. So, and then camp requests, we have a whole bunch of them. Some of them, thank you for approving those ahead of time. Time just snuck up on us. I do need to make a note that we did approve Highland football camp a while ago, and it was scheduled for the 6th, 7th, and 8th of June, but the helmets that got sent to be reconditioned did not get back in time, so they're moving that camp to July 18th, 19th, and 20th.
okay,
Okay? And that is it for my stuff.
okay.
Any
thank you.
questions? I'll be more than happy to answer.
Okay, Jonathan, the next topic is business operations.
Okay, thank you. There's just a few things, just more information. Again, with the U.S. Congress not renewing that free lunch program, we do have to charge for lunch in the fall. And so we're trying to get that message out to everyone that, because they did that, we do have to. And despite some rising in prices, we do want to be sensitive to families' budgets, so we're not raising the prices for our breakfasts and lunches. However, we do know that, hey, Mom, I need some lunch money is going to be a common conversation, just because so we're trying to get this word out. So the first thing in your packet is, again, some eligibility percentages for free and reduced lunch. And if we look at the bottom, district-wide, and add up those two columns of percentages, we're at 27.79. And that is lower than it should be. And so that's what we're really trying to get to these people that should qualify, but haven't had to fill out the paperwork because it was free. But now they're going to need to do that, and they can start that in July. Again, there's the trend line as well, and you can see the blue and the red line, again, that they have kind of been tapering off there because they just didn't need to fill out those forms. You'll look at some monthly, on the next sheet is some charts. The left-hand side shows this year, again, that decrease, but then you'll look in that 2021 school year that we averaged, it was close to 43%. So we anticipate that we'll be back up there, so that tells us that we do need families to fill those out so that they can receive these benefits of free lunch or reduced lunch.
Okay.
And so we'll just wanted to kind of share that with you, and we'll all look at that hopefully as it goes forward. The other part of offering, that not offering free lunches, again, that they have to pay, and that we try to minimize the amount of negative balances in our district. And so you can see the current, there's several sheets there. That first page is the fall, and they flip the next page into the spring. Again, very low. These, basically, a learner would only charge something if they bought an extra milk or a la carte item and so forth. Some of these are even, some of these actually do include staff, if I do remember correctly. But so relatively small, but wanted to kind of give you a baseline of where we'll start. We anticipate these will go up a little bit, but we need to still, it's something that we manage, and everyone, tries to keep that as low as possible. And I believe, let me get back to my agenda, was that the two
I
I?
think it's, yeah.
I believe that's
Yeah.
it, okay, thanks.
Carl, with IC Employee Services?
All right, I took more than my fair share tonight, so I'll be really short here. Just a couple things that just need to be aware of. Kevin, I talked to him earlier this evening, and he just wanted to mention, or want us to mention, we had the Chromebooks that the kids take out home from, or we give out as kind of a textbook from the technology department. They've had 95% of them returned, and most of those that have not been returned or have been assigned to summer school students. So they're very happy about that percentage has come back. This
Are
is
they in condition to be reused? I mean,
they are. Last year was kind of haphazard. This year was much better in the way of tracking, so they know who has them, and they've been contacting them. So, when I talk about last year as haphazard, a lot of the kids had Chromebooks that were going to be discontinued anyway. So whether they came back or not, it wasn't a big issue because all of a sudden they became a big paperweight. So, but they were happy with those results. Just to let you know, IC has been done for the month of June. However, the state has asked us to reduce the number of warnings that we have. And I know Sue's been involved in some of those conversations. We are going to have to do some training and some professional development of some of our folks who work with IC to make sure that they are doing things a little more by the book, I guess, by taking kids out of the system when they need to instead of holding on to them in anticipation that they'll be back soon or going to summer school. That's causing some warnings that the state's frowning on. So we will have those conversations as we begin the new year as well.
And they're academic, having to do with academic, not safety wording, is that right?
Data.
It's just
data.
It's just data entry.
Oh, okay.
A good example is they will stick a student in a homeroom. There is no attendance accumulated for that kid in the homeroom, and so we get a warning that says the student, he's enrolled, but there's no attendance for him. But he's just sitting in a homeroom in anticipation that he will likely be back to summer school or something like similar to that. Juvenile detention is another one of kids coming from all districts around the state, or this part of the state, and we don't have all the data that we need for them. So anyway, there's some things we can work on. So we'll work on that as the year progresses. So that is it.
Oh, thank you. Next on the agenda is Human Resources, which will be presented by Brenda Miner.
Good evening. I wanted to do a little bit of an update. I remember I talked to you last month about our certified staff and would like to just kind of update a little bit more on where we are with our classified staff and just to kind of give you some ideas of the openings we have, some of the plans in place, and some of the things that we're working on. So to start with, in our food service department, we have more openings this year starting in the summer. We usually have some people who leave, but we have more this summer than we have in the past because of the fact of how many we didn't have filled at the end of the school year. And when I say that, I can't compliment the food service staff enough that really took it upon themselves and put it on their own backs to be able to make things work. Mr. Balls and I had a conversation with the supervisors and Mr. Wilson and brainstormed ideas and had very productive meeting about some of the ideas that we're hopeful will get us some people hired. And as you know, thank you to you guys for the salary increases that, and some of those came through that food service component. So we're looking at that as we move forward. Again, in transportation, along the same lines, we have quite a few bus driver openings, and we just haven't assigned routes to those bus drivers yet. So if you've noticed on social media, we have some information about being a bus driver and what that salary is and those types of things. Maintenance, I could honestly say, knock on wood, we're pretty fortunate. We have one electrician and one night custodian. I can honestly say I've never seen it that low, so that is wonderful. The next part's a little tricky. It kind of deals with support staff and Head Start a little bit. It's hard to hire those positions in the summer because they don't start until August, right? And we know when we think about people and working and we're looking at inflation and all those things, people are looking at next week. It's a lot harder for them to look down the road and think, I'll start this job in August. So when the number looks kind of high in those areas to me, and in our paraprofessionals in all of those areas, we have quite a few openings. We have them in our instructional. We have those in our behavior techs, which go through our middle school and high school as well as elementary, and then also in our personal care. So we have quite a few of those openings in Head Start and support staff, and that's pretty normal because of the fact that a lot of times we would hire them, principals would try and get all their hiring done so they could have, a little bit of a break, and then they would end up rehiring again in August because someone would take a position before that, before summer was over. And so we look at those a little differently. Also, we have multiple athletic openings and activities positions, and those have been being hired regularly as well. I have no concerns in that respect. As far as our certified positions, we have 10 total middle school and high school and 10 in the elementary, and we're hiring those. I mean, just today before I came in, I could have added 2 more positions that have been filled. So we're having some new applicants that are coming in, and is always a hopeful sign when we see those come in as summer goes on. And some principals will wait to hire those positions just to see as July and August come around. And then another thing is, sometimes if we're getting later in the year hiring, and then that August 1st hire is another time when we pick up a lot of our last hires for the year. I'm excited to announce we're going to have another job fair. Last year, I went back and looked at the notes, and we had a job fair outside, and it was blistering hot. So I think we're going to transfer that job fair inside, and we'll do it here in the boardroom. But some of the things are going to stay the same. In fact, Courtney and I tomorrow will meet with Paul Anderson and to start doing the radio ads to get that out on the radio, and then we'll go in that last week before the job fair and do morning broadcasts with Paul, and just to get the word out. Another thing that's in your packet, I had Renee add just right here at the end, is sometimes it's hard to think of it this way, but as I've talked to you before a little bit about some of the other benefits that are a part of the district. So you can see in there that there's a little flyer that we've put together that talks about the total benefits. And sometimes it's hard to believe, but it's over $10,000 is the benefits that come along with a position in the district, even if the hourly rate is not the same. And so you can see here just talking about how it all adds up, and just really trying to focus on the family-friendly schedules, the benefits, and just some of those other opportunities, the wellness program, and those types of things that we maybe miss sometimes. And so I know that I shared this with food service, and I know that Mr. Wilson was making a banner with this flyer on that, and we'll try and get that out in all different aspects, but we just had it finished. And I think it'll be helpful to kind of look at that and kind of look at some of the other benefits. So I just had, I think you have that in your packet. And then, again, that's going to be on July 14th, 10 to 2 is the job fair, and it will be here. And then we're also, if they start to fill out an application, then we're going to have a food voucher. Last year, we had a food truck out front, so we're kind of thinking of trying something a little different there. And then I would say one of my highlights by far is this week we started meeting with new teachers. And so with a new administrative assistant, I was a little panicked if we were going to have that happen this early, and she is doing a fabulous job. And we've had new teachers in, and there's sometimes in HR, there's not a lot of really exciting pieces, but this is definitely one. So they're super excited to see their first contract, and it's kind of fun for me to see what they make their first year when I think about me quite a few years ago. I won't say how many, but to see what that looks like. And they're just so excited. And so we've started to meet with them, and we try and do that one-on-one, especially this year with the insurance and all of those things, so that we can share those benefits with them. And to be honest with you, it's been a really positive experience. So we've always, I say, I've only done this 2 years where I've had to have people that have come in, and sometimes when they've looked at the insurance to put their family on has been more of a cringe, and we haven't had that so far, so I'm thankful for that piece. And then we will have our 3 new directors will start July 1st. Chuck and Jeff have both used some vacation days to end their career here, and I can't even say it very well. And then Lori's last day is tomorrow. And so they've just been a wonderful addition to our district. And I know personally, I can't thank them enough. They've made me better. So any questions on hiring?
Still optimistic?
Very optimistic. I think we're doing really well. And again, we've even filled some of those English jobs that I was nervous about. So
Math
we're-
ones?
we're on a good trajectory. Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. Next on the agenda is the board calendar.
So we have a couple items that, and you can read what's on your calendar. You've got, Judge Murray's retirement celebration is next week. And then I'm going to personally invite you to our summer school graduation. That will be on July 5th, and it'll be from 4 to 5. And right now, we're on track to graduate 7 of our 8. So all 7 that showed up, and they're on track to graduate, so,
All right.
yes.
Where will that be?
It will be here.
Here.
Yep. And then July 12th, you have Community Prevention Committee meeting, and then our next board meeting right now is scheduled for July 19th. So it
Okay.
should be a quieter month for you guys.
Thank you.
So can I ask my question? I had had a picnic last night with Janie Gephardt. We were just chatting, and one of the things that she had suggested or asked is whether or not there is a strategy session that happens during the summer. And so that's when I had texted you about when our next work session was, and when you said, oh, it's not till September. Is that not something, I mean, I don't know if the other board members are interested in that. I just feel like I'm not ready to just dive into deep end.
I feel
Right,
like there's a lot that
September?
needs to be discussed, and a
Right.
lot that we need to
Yeah.
get up to speed on.
Before the school
Yeah.
kicks off. So I would like to, I don't know if that's a chair thing to make a motion, or I,
That's something I will probably bring up to Doug.
Okay.
Because I know that we plan to begin board training again
Oh,
when we
okay.
get into the fall. So that would probably be what we would do with that
Okay.
type of
Yeah.
training, rather than going into all of like the governance and open meeting. It would more be like, strategic planning and all of that stuff of what's to come for the school year.
okay.
It would be nice if we could, have, just dialogue.
I think probably the first part of August.
Okay,
Is when
okay.
we would do our next board training, because we just needed to get into that next fiscal year to have a new board training budget.
Okay, okay. I've got some dates in August that are tricky, so,
Okay.
but that was one I was hoping to see.
Okay.
And so are you talking about board training or a
Not-
strategy session without trainers? That it's, I guess I would like to know,
More of a
I guess
board.
I would like to know kind of more what.
I'm not looking to have ISBA come in
Right,
and
no, and I don't
talk
think
with
it would
us.
be
Yeah,
that.
Okay, that's my question.
thank you.
Okay, good. Next on the agenda is public and written comment. I don't think we've received any. So we'll go into the action items now. And the first item of business to approve is early graduation request. Is there a motion?
I hereby move that the board approve the early graduation requests as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion's passed. Next item on the agenda is a second reading for the adoption of policy 8506, student use of personal electronic devices. Is there a motion?
Hereby move that the board hear on second reading for adoption policy 8506, student use of personal electronic devices as presented.
There's a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next item is to approve the out-of-state and overnight travel request. Is there a motion?
I hereby move that the board approve the out-of-state overnight travel requests as presented.
A second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion's passed. Final item on business is to approve the camp request. Is there a motion?
I hereby move that the board approve the camp requests as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, this concludes this meeting, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I hereby move that we adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's good. Thank you.
Here.
Thank you very much.